My name is Elsie, and I'm 54 years old. Standing on the sidewalk in front of the house where I'd lived for 30 years, I felt my phone vibrate in my coat pocket. It was my son. His voice was cold, detached, nothing like the warm boy I'd raised. "Mom, we changed the locks. You don't live here anymore." The words hung in the air like ice. I should have felt panic, rage, devastation. Instead, I smiled softly and said, "That's very brave of you, son." Then I hung up. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for? Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. What my son discovered 2 days later changed everything, and I promise you won't believe how this story unfolds. The letter from my lawyer was just the beginning. I need to take you back 24 years to help you understand how we got here. My husband Thomas died in a car accident when our son Dylan was only 3 years old. One moment I had a partner, a future, a plan. The next moment, I was a widow with a toddler and barely enough money in our savings account to cover the funeral expenses. Thomas hadn't gotten around to buying life insurance. He was only 29. We thought we had time. Those early years after his death were the hardest of my life. I worked as an accountant during the day at a small firm downtown, crunching numbers until my eyes burned. 3 nights a week, I waited tables at a family restaurant called Rosie's Diner, smiling at customers while my feet screamed in pain. On weekends, I cleaned office buildings, pushing a vacuum cleaner through empty corporate spaces while Dylan stayed with my neighbor. I was exhausted all the time. My body ached. I lived on coffee and 4 hours of sleep, but I never missed a single one of Dylan's school events. Not one parent-teacher conference, not one soccer game, not one science fair. Every paycheck I put aside whatever I could. Some months it was $50. Some months it was only $20. I dreamed of the day Dylan would go to college, the day he'd have opportunities I never had. And he did. Dylan was a smart kid, driven and focused. He graduated near the top of his class and got accepted into a good business program. I'd saved enough to help him through school without drowning in student loans. Watching him walk across that stage to receive his diploma was the proudest moment of my life. All those sleepless nights, all those aching muscles, all those sacrifices finally felt worth it. After graduation, Dylan landed a job at a tech company. The pay was good, the benefits were solid. He moved into his own apartment and started building a career. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. My job as a mother was complete, or so I thought. Let me tell you about the house. I bought it 25 years ago, right after Thomas died. It wasn't much, just a small 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in a quiet neighborhood, but it was mine. Well, it would be mine after I paid the mortgage. For 20 years, I made those payments without fail. Rain or shine, sick or healthy, that mortgage got paid. 3 years ago, I made my final payment. I actually cried when I wrote that last check. The house was completely paid off. No more debt, just property taxes and utilities. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. I could actually save money for retirement. I could think about slowing down. The backyard had a small garden where Dylan used to play when he was little. I could still picture him at 5 years old, digging in the dirt, looking for worms. Every corner of that house held memories. The kitchen where I taught him to make pancakes, the living room where we watched movies on Friday nights, the front porch where we carved pumpkins every October. This wasn't just a house. It was the physical embodiment of my entire adult life. Dylan's success felt like vindication. I'd done it. I'd raised a good man on my own. I'd given him every opportunity, and now I could finally rest, enjoy my little home, maybe even travel a bit. I started planning for early retirement. I reduced my hours at work. I joined a book club. I planted new flowers in the garden. Life was finally getting easier. Then, 2 years ago, everything began to shift. Dylan called me one Sunday afternoon and asked if he could bring someone to dinner. "I want you to meet Stephanie," he said, and I could hear the happiness in his voice. Of course I said yes. I was thrilled. My son had found someone special. I spent all day Saturday preparing his favorite meal, the same pot roast and mashed potatoes I'd made for his birthdays growing up. I cleaned the house until it sparkled. I even bought fresh flowers for the table. Stephanie arrived wearing an expensive-looking dress and heels that clicked on my hardwood floors. She was 28 years old, beautiful in that polished magazine cover kind of way. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair looked professionally styled. When she walked into my home, her eyes swept across the living room with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Oh," she said, her voice bright but somehow hollow. "It's very cozy, very retro." I felt a small prick of discomfort, but pushed it away. During dinner, Stephanie talked about her job in marketing, the trips she'd taken to Paris and Barcelona, the trendy restaurants she loved. She seemed nice enough, if a bit focused on material things. Dylan watched her with absolute adoration. I wanted to be happy for him. I tried to be happy for him. 1 year later, they got married. The wedding was large and expensive, paid for mostly by Dylan's savings. Stephanie had very specific ideas about everything. The flowers had to be imported peonies. The venue had to be a historic mansion. The photographer had to be award-winning. I offered to help plan, but Stephanie politely declined every suggestion. "I have a vision," she kept saying. At the wedding, I was seated at a table near the back, far from the family table where Stephanie's parents and siblings sat. When I mentioned this to Dylan, he looked uncomfortable. "Stephanie's really stressed about everything, Mom. Please, just understand." So I smiled and said nothing, even though it hurt to be treated like a distant relative at my own son's wedding. 3 months after the wedding, Dylan called with a request. "Mom, Stephanie and I were wondering if we could move in with you for a while. Just temporarily until we save enough for a down payment on our own place. Maybe 6 months a year at most." I didn't hesitate. "Of course, honey. This is your home too." I was actually excited. I'd have my son back under my roof. We'd share meals again. It would be like old times. Stephanie moved in with an enormous amount of belongings. Boxes and boxes of clothes, decorations, kitchen gadgets. She immediately started rearranging things. "This furniture is so outdated, Elsie," she said, not even calling me Mom like Dylan did. "We really need to modernize if we're all going to live here comfortably." I tried to laugh it off, but the comment stung. This was my furniture, chosen carefully over years, each piece connected to a memory. The first few weeks were fine, or at least manageable, but I started noticing small changes. Stephanie would move my things without asking. She'd rearrange the kitchen cabinets. She'd adjust the thermostat without checking with me first. When I gently mentioned it, Dylan said, "She's just trying to make the space work for all of us, Mom. Try to be flexible." I noticed something else too. Stephanie never called me Mom. It was always Elsie. And the way she said it wasn't warm or affectionate. It was distant, like I was a landlord, rather than her mother-in-law. Dylan started spending less time talking to me. At dinner, he'd discuss his day with Stephanie, but barely ask about mine. I felt myself becoming invisible in my own home, a background character in their story. 6 months after they moved in, things escalated. I came home from work one afternoon to find Stephanie standing in the hallway with her hands on her hips. "Elsie, we need to talk," she said. "Dylan and I have been discussing it, and we really need the master bedroom. You should take the smaller room at the end of the hall. We're a young couple. We need more space." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "But that's my room," I said quietly. "I've slept there for 25 years, since before Dylan was born." Stephanie's smile was tight. "Exactly. You've had it for 25 years. Time to switch things up, don't you think?" Dylan came home an hour later. I tried to talk to him privately, but Stephanie joined us immediately. "Mom," Dylan said, not quite meeting my eyes, "it's really not a big deal. The other room is nice too, and we do need more space. You understand, right?" The way he said it, it wasn't really a question. It was a statement. I wanted to fight. I wanted to say no, but I looked at my son's face, saw how much he wanted me to agree, and I couldn't bear to disappoint him. So I moved my things to the smaller bedroom, the one that used to be Dylan's childhood room. That was just the beginning. Over the next few months, my house stopped feeling like my house. Stephanie hired painters without consulting me and changed the warm beige walls to stark gray. She threw out my old couch, the one I'd saved for months to buy, calling it an eyesore. My family photos came down from the walls. "We need a more cohesive aesthetic," Stephanie explained, replacing them with modern art prints and large photos from their wedding. One day, I came home to find the photo of Thomas and me on our wedding day had been removed from the mantel. I found it later shoved in a box in the garage. When I asked about it, Stephanie shrugged. "It's depressing to have dead people on display, Elsie. We're trying to create a positive environment." Dylan said nothing in my defense. Stephanie created rules. I could only use the kitchen during certain hours because She and Dylan needed their meal prep space. I was asked to eat dinner in my room when they had friends over. We need our privacy, Stephanie said sweetly. I'm sure you understand. The living room became off limits during their movie nights. The back porch where I used to drink my morning coffee became their meditation space. Then came the conversation about money. We were sitting at the kitchen table, me with my coffee, Stephanie with her laptop. Elsie, we need to talk about finances, she said, her voice businesslike. Since we're all living here together, shouldn't we be splitting the bills 3 ways? It's only fair. I was confused. But the house is paid off. There's no mortgage, just property taxes and utilities, which I've always paid. Stephanie's expression hardened slightly. We're contributing to the household. We're helping maintain the property. Maybe we should formalize this arrangement. After all, we're investing our time and energy here too. Dylan nodded along, saying nothing to defend me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I spent most of my time hiding in the small bedroom, the one that used to be filled with Dylan's childhood things. I'd lie on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become so small. I called my best friend Patricia one evening, nearly in tears. I feel like a guest in my own home, I told her. I paid for that house with my blood, sweat, and tears, Pat, and now I'm being pushed into a corner. Patricia was furious on my behalf. This isn't right, Elsie. It's your house. Your name is on the deed. You need to stand up for yourself. But I kept making excuses. He's my son. I can't just kick him out. What kind of mother would I be? Patricia sighed. What kind of son is he being to you? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about Thomas, wishing he were there to talk to. He would have known what to do. Around 3 a.m, I made a decision. I needed to protect myself. I needed to be prepared for the worst, even if I hoped it would never come to that. The next day, I called a lawyer. His name was George Martinez, and he'd been recommended by a colleague at work. I gathered every document related to the house, the deed, the final mortgage payment confirmation, the property tax records, everything. Mr. Martinez reviewed the papers carefully in his office. Mrs. Elsie, he said, looking up at me over his reading glasses, this house is legally yours and yours alone. Your name is the only name on the deed. Your son and his wife have no legal claim to this property whatsoever. I felt a wave of relief mixed with sadness. I just want to be prepared, I told him, in case things get worse. Mr. Martinez nodded understandingly. Smart thinking. Let me draft some documents. If they try anything, we'll be ready to respond immediately. I left his office feeling both empowered and heartbroken. I was preparing for war with my own son. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 1 year after Dylan and Stephanie had moved in. I'd been at work finishing up some accounting reports, my mind wandering to what I might make for dinner. I drove home through familiar streets, noticing that the maple trees were starting to turn gold. Autumn had always been my favorite season. I pulled into the driveway and walked up to the front door, keys in hand. I slid my key into the lock and turned. Nothing happened. I tried again. The key wouldn't turn. Confused, I examined the lock. It looked different, newer. My heart started pounding. My phone rang. Dylan's name appeared on the screen. I answered, still standing on the porch. Dylan, I can't get into the house. I think there's something wrong with the lock. There was a pause. Then his voice came through cold and flat in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, we changed the locks. You don't live here anymore. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't process the words. What, Dylan? What are you talking about? This is my house. Stephanie and I have decided this is our home now, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. You need to find somewhere else to live. We'll pack up your things and send them to you. My legs felt weak. I gripped the porch railing. Dylan, I raised you in this house. I worked 3 jobs to pay for this house. You can't just kick me out. You're getting old, Mom. His words were like knives. You can't take care of this place anymore. We're actually doing you a favor. You should be in something smaller, easier to manage. We're helping you. I looked around. Mrs. Chen from next door was watering her flowers, pretending not to watch. Mr. Abernathy across the street had paused his lawn mowing. They could probably tell something was wrong. The humiliation burned through me. But underneath the shock and hurt, something else stirred. A memory of sitting in Mr. Martinez's office. A memory of documents being prepared. A memory of deciding to protect myself. I took a deep breath. My voice, when I spoke, was surprisingly steady. "That's very brave of you, son." "What?" Dylan sounded thrown off. "I said that's very brave. Changing the locks on your mother's house. That takes a certain kind of courage." I paused. "You'll hear from me soon, Dylan." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I looked at my house one more time, memorizing it. The blue shutters I'd painted 5 years ago. The flower boxes under the windows. The front door where I'd taken Dylan's first day of school photos every year. Then I turned and walked to my car. I called Patricia. "I need a place to stay for a few days," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Can I come over?" "Oh my God, Elsie, what happened?" Patricia's voice was full of concern. "I'll tell you everything when I get there," I said, "but first I need to make another call." I pulled up Mr. Martinez's number. He answered on the second ring. "George, it's Elsie. It's time. Please send the letter." "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "I'm sure. They changed the locks. They told me I don't live there anymore." There was a sharp intake of breath. "That's illegal lockout." This just became much more serious. "I'll have the letter sent by certified mail first thing tomorrow morning. They're going to regret this, Elsie." As I drove to Patricia's house, tears finally came. Not just tears of hurt, but tears of rage, grief, betrayal. My son, my baby boy, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had just thrown me out of my own home. But mixed with the pain was something else, a grim satisfaction. They'd made a terrible mistake, and they were about to find out just how big a mistake it was. I spent that first night at Patricia's house crying until I had no tears left. She made me tea, held my hand, and listened while I told her everything. "They're going to pay for this," Patricia said fiercely. "Nobody treats you like this. Nobody." The next morning, Mr. Martinez called. "The letter is being sent by certified mail today. They'll have it by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. It explains that they are unlawfully occupying your property, that they committed illegal lockout, and that they have 7 days to vacate the premises or face immediate legal action. I've also included that you reserve the right to pursue damages." "What kind of damages?" I asked. "Emotional distress, illegal eviction, theft of property. We can make their lives very difficult, Elsie. They crossed a line they shouldn't have crossed." 2 days after that horrible phone call, I got a text from Mr. Martinez. "The letter was delivered and signed for at 10:15 this morning. Your son received it personally." I imagined Dylan's face as he opened that envelope. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt vindicated. According to Mr. Martinez, who had connections with other lawyers in town, Dylan immediately called a lawyer himself. He wanted to know if there was any way around it. But the answer was simple and brutal. The house was in my name only. Dylan had no legal claim whatsoever. By changing the locks and denying me entry, he'd committed illegal lockout, which carried serious penalties. Dylan started calling my phone. I let it go to voicemail. The first message was angry. "Mom, you can't do this. We're family." The second was desperate. "Please, we need to talk about this." The third was almost tearful. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd actually kick us out." I texted back only once. "Talk to my lawyer." Dylan tried again. "Mom, please. Stephanie said this was the best thing. She said you'd be happier somewhere smaller." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "You're a grown man, Dylan. You made your own choice. Now live with it." At home, according to what I later learned, things were falling apart between Dylan and Stephanie. She was furious about the letter. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "We've put money into that house. We redecorated. That has to count for something." Dylan, finally seeing clearly, shot back. "What money? We haven't paid rent. We haven't paid bills. You threw out her furniture without permission. You kicked her out of her own bedroom." "If you had any spine, you'd fight this," Stephanie spat. "Fight my own mother." Dylan's voice rose. "The woman who worked 3 jobs to raise me. The woman who sacrificed everything so I could go to college. You want me to fight her?" It was the first time Dylan had stood up to Stephanie, and once he started seeing clearly, he couldn't stop. He remembered all the small cruelties, the way Stephanie had slowly pushed me out of my own home, the way she'd thrown away my belongings, the way she'd made me feel like an unwelcome guest. He remembered his mother's face at the wedding, seated far from family. He remembered the hurt in my eyes when I moved to the smaller bedroom. All the moments he'd ignored or explained away suddenly crashed down on him. That night, Dylan couldn't sleep. He walked through the house really seeing it for the first time in months. My photos were gone. My furniture was gone. Every trace of me had been erased except for the small bedroom where they'd shoved me. He thought about me working as a waitress when I was exhausted just to save money for his education. He thought about me at his soccer games cheering loudly even though I'd worked a double shift. He thought about the day I handed him the check for his first semester of college, tears in my eyes, saying, "I'm so proud of you." And he'd repaid me by letting his wife throw me out of my own home. The shame was overwhelming. On the third day, Dylan showed up at Mr. Martinez's office without an appointment. "I need to see my mother," he told the receptionist. "Please, I need to talk to her." Mr. Martinez came out of his office. "Your mother will decide if and when she wants to see you, young man. What you did was unconscionable." Dylan's face crumpled. I know it was. Please, just ask her. I need to apologize." Mr. Martinez called me. "Your son is here. He wants to see you. I can send him away if you want." I thought about it for a long moment. "I'll come to your office, but only with you present." An hour later, I walked into that conference room. Dylan looked terrible. His eyes were red and swollen. He'd lost weight. When he saw me, he started crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how I could have done that to you." I sat down across from him, my face impassive. "What were you thinking, Dylan?" He wiped his eyes. "Stephanie kept talking about how you were getting older, how we needed more space, how we deserved to have our own home. She made it sound so reasonable. She said you'd be happier in a smaller place, that we were doing you a favor. And I listened. I believed her. I chose her over you." "You didn't just choose her over me," I said quietly. "You betrayed me. You threw me out of the house I worked 3 jobs to pay for. The house where I raised you alone after your father died. You changed the locks like I was some kind of intruder." Dylan buried his face in his hands. I know. There's no excuse. I was weak. I wanted to make Stephanie happy, and I forgot about making you happy. I forgot about everything you did for me." "Where is Stephanie now?" I asked. Dylan looked up. "I asked her to leave. After we got your lawyer's letter, I told her what the lawyer said. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit she was wrong. She blamed you, called you manipulative, said you were playing victim. That's when I finally saw who she really was. She's moved back to her mother's place. I've filed for divorce." I felt a flash of satisfaction, though I kept my face neutral. "That doesn't fix what you did to me, Dylan." "I know," he said miserably. "I know it doesn't, but I want to try. I want to make this right somehow." I leaned forward. "Dylan, I love you. I always will. You're my son. But what you did was unforgivable. If you want any chance of rebuilding our relationship, there are going to be conditions." He nodded quickly. "Anything. I'll do anything. First, you move out of my house immediately. Tomorrow, you find your own place." Dylan nodded. "Second, you start seeing a therapist. You need to understand how you let someone manipulate you into hurting your own mother. You need to work on yourself." He nodded again. "Third, you stand on your own 2 feet. No asking me for money. No asking me for help. You're a grown man with a good job. Act like it." "I understand," Dylan whispered. "And fourth, we rebuild trust slowly. Through actions, not words. I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I ever will be. But if you're serious about making amends, you'll prove it over time. Years, maybe, not days or weeks." Dylan reached across the table like he wanted to hold my hand, then stopped himself. "I'll do all of it, Mom. I promise. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm sorry." "We'll see," I said. I stood up. "You have 7 days to get out. Use them wisely." 2 days later, Dylan moved out. He rented a small apartment across town. He came by one last time to return my keys, the new ones they'd had made without my permission. He stood on the porch, the same porch where I'd stood just days before, locked out. "I'm sorry," he said one more time. "I know that doesn't mean much right now, but I am." I took the keys. "Goodbye, Dylan." I closed the door. Walking back into my house after Dylan moved out felt surreal. I unlocked the door with my original key, which Mr. Martinez had retrieved for me. The house was quiet, empty in a way it hadn't been in over a year. I walked through each room slowly. So much had changed. The walls were gray instead of beige. The furniture was all different. My photos were gone, but it was still my house. My name was on the deed. My sweat and sacrifice had paid for it, and now it was truly mine again. The first week was hard. I'd wake up in the night, forgetting I was alone, expecting to hear voices from the other room. The house felt too big and too empty. I cried a lot, not just about Dylan, but about everything. About Thomas, who I still missed after all these years. About the life I'd imagined versus the life I'd gotten. About being 54 years old and feeling utterly alone. Patricia came over almost every day that first week. She'd bring groceries, cook meals, just sit with me. Other friends called. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, brought over a casserole and gave me a long hug. "I saw what happened," she said. "I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that." The support helped. It reminded me I wasn't as alone as I felt. Slowly, I started to reclaim my space. I couldn't afford to change everything back, but I started small. I repainted my bedroom, choosing a soft lavender that made me happy. I hung my family photos back up. I put the picture of Thomas and me on our wedding day back on the mantle, right where it belonged. I found my old couch in the garage covered in dust and dragged it back inside. It was worn and outdated, but it was mine, and I loved it. I started spending time in the garden again. I planted new flowers, pulled weeds, felt the sun on my face. I joined a new book club at the local library. I started volunteering at the community center, helping seniors with their taxes. Slowly, painfully, I built a life that was just mine. Not defined by being Dylan's mother. Not defined by being Thomas's widow. Just mine. 3 months after everything happened, Dylan sent me an email. He didn't call or text because I'd asked him not to. In the email, he told me about his therapy sessions. He was learning about codependency, about how he'd lost himself trying to please Stephanie. He was learning to set boundaries. He was learning that being a good son didn't mean being a doormat. He didn't ask to see me. He just wanted me to know he was working on himself. I didn't respond, but I saved the email. He sent another one the next week and the week after that. Small updates about his life. Nothing dramatic, just showing up consistently, proving he meant what he said. 6 months after that terrible day, I agreed to meet Dylan for coffee. We sat in a small cafe downtown, both nervous. He looked healthier. His eyes were clearer. He told me more about his therapy, about the divorce being finalized, about his job. He asked about my life, really listened to my answers. It wasn't comfortable, there was too much hurt between us. But it was a start. "Mom," he said as we were leaving, "I know I can't fix what I did. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep trying to be the son you deserved all along." I looked at him for a long moment. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy, Dylan. We're starting from zero. You understand that? "I understand," he said. As I drove home that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of peace. I'd learned something through all of this. I'd learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. I'd learned that being a good mother doesn't mean being a doormat. I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to set boundaries and enforce them. I'd learned that I deserve respect even from my own child, especially from my own child. Now, a year after everything happened, I'm living the life I always wanted. I retired fully from my job. I travel with Patricia. We took a trip to the mountains last month, stayed in a little cabin, hiked every day. I'm part of 3 different clubs. I have dinner with friends twice a week. My house is exactly how I want it. I wake up every morning in my own bed, in my own master bedroom, in my own paid-off house, and I'm grateful. Dylan and I have coffee once a month. He never misses it. He's in a new relationship with a kind woman named Jennifer who actually calls me Mom and seems to genuinely like me. He asks my permission before making big decisions. He respects my boundaries. We're not where we used to be. We may never be, but we're somewhere. And that's more than I thought we'd have. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't prepared, if I hadn't seen the lawyer, if I hadn't protected myself. But then I realize the real question isn't what if. The real question is, why did it take losing everything for my son to see my worth? Why did I have to prove my value through legal documents instead of through 30 years of sacrifice and love? And maybe that's a question only Dylan can answer. Maybe it's a question he'll spend the rest of his life trying to answer. As for me, I'm done waiting for other people to value me. I'm done making myself smaller to make others comfortable. I finally learned to value myself, and that I've discovered is the greatest gift I could ever give myself. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family even when it broke your heart? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that we deserve respect, that we deserve to take up space, that our sacrifices matter. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you something to think about. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Take care of yourselves out there. You're worth it.